Call this meeting to order. Is my microphone on? It's on and working. Welcome, everybody, to the Instructional Committee meeting on May 7th, 2018. Our first order of business is to take consensus to accept our meeting minutes dated March 5th, 2018. Can we start on that side?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And yes. Do I have to do with questions? I don't have to do opposed abstention. We're just taking consensus. Okay. We are going to talk tonight about the Connecticut School Health Survey, the 2017 Wallingford results. So I will now present Mr. Tony Loomis and Craig Turner. And
Celeste George.
Celeste George, welcome.
Thank you for having us here tonight. Very briefly, I wanted to give you a quick history of the Connecticut School Health Survey. As many of you know, this was the third administration of the Connecticut School Health Survey, and Wallingford is the only district to have done that. And why has Wallingford done that 3 times, administered this survey? Wallingford has done that because the district understands the strong connection between student wellness and academic achievement. And the district recognizes its role in promoting the well-being of all students. And this is just one of the many reasons why Wallingford stands out and above other districts. So what we have here is a breakdown of the Healthy Wallingford 2020 committee from the town hall. And I have to mention this because the Healthy Wallingford 2020 has embraced the Eat, Play, Unplug initiative. And that initiative started in the school system. We helped do a lot of the research for that and determined that this is definitely an area of need and something that we want to embrace. And our motto right now is to choose kindness. But also, again, the theme, overall arching theme, is the Eat, Play, Unplug. And so this school health survey is helping us determine what areas that we need to emphasize and focus on and what programs are needed in order to fulfill this. At the district level, this is a breakdown of our wellness management team. And the survey results help us make informed decisions on focus areas and goals for the strategic plan, which will be coming to you soon in June. So this survey really, truly helps the district out and the entire town. A lot of different people use this. I have mentioned before that we are making a huge shift to a wellness model here in Wallingford. And a wellness model is a continuum. And this is, I particularly like this example here. A lot of people will focus on the left side, disability symptoms and signs, and what we're trying to do is be proactive and work on awareness, education, and growth. We believe that wellness means a balance of physical, intellectual, emotional, and social well-being. And again, this survey is giving us data to help us better move to the right of this wellness continuum and help our students move to the right of this wellness continuum. Much like this continuum, the results can be interpreted on a continuum, on a scale here. The survey results showed us some clear progress in certain areas, some areas where we saw both gains and setbacks, and we have some areas where there are still very clear concerns. Some of the areas that we've had clear progress: alcohol consumption amongst our youth and advocating for needs. So what that means for advocating for needs, that's students speaking up saying, hey, I need some help. So we have more students doing that. As far as gains and setbacks, we saw some positives and negatives as far as our student mental health goes. So we have some signs that we're moving in the right direction, but also that there is still work to be done. The same can be said about family engagement. And this was a piece that we had added and we had talked about quite a bit. So we have some signs that, yes, families are getting more engaged, parents are getting more engaged, but we also have some signs that are saying we have some still a ways to go. And then last, the clear concerns. The physical health of our students is a clear concern. Dating violence amongst our students, and gambling amongst our students. I would like to welcome up now, for a moment, Celeste George. She is the epidemiologist for the Connecticut State Department of State Department of Public Health. Excuse me. She's going to dive into these areas and these numbers and show you some more specifics. Celeste.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me again this year. It's been a pleasure of several years working with the district, and I do this more on a statewide level. Am I speaking loud enough into the mic? And so it's a little more rewarding to work directly with a district because we can actually see the data put into action. So I appreciate the opportunity. The background of the survey, I know we have some new board members, so I just wanted to briefly go over what is the Connecticut School Health Survey. Nationally, the School Health Survey is known as the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and it is designed and tested and sponsored by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Here in Connecticut, we join it with one other survey, the Youth Tobacco Survey, and to simplify things, because we're such a small state, we package the two different surveys as the Connecticut School Health Survey, which with each individual survey being called a component. So I might interchange the School Health Survey with the acronym YRBS, Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So the history in Connecticut is that the CDC releases a core questionnaire. States that administer this, which almost all the states administer, are required to keep 2/3 of the questions the same. This allows the CDC to compare between two states, compare states to national average. And in Connecticut, we take that opportunity to modify the 1/3 that we do not have to keep on to issues that are more relevant to the Connecticut population, things that might not be found in different regions of the United States but are found here in New England. And when we first started working on the Wallingford version of the survey, we further modified, being careful to stay with the questions that were still tested and designed by the CDC. So they provide us with optional questions that have been tested for reliability and validity. So in Wallingford in 2017, we had resulted in about 1,700 usable surveys from the students that participated. The advantage of doing this multiple times, it allows us to compare Wallingford results over time and to state data where the questions were the same. Some things to consider when we do mention any state results. We are so close to releasing 2017 state data, but not tonight, so I can't really talk about the state comparison. However, Wallingford conducted this survey in the fall, and the state conducts a survey in the spring. So there is, the later in the school year you get, especially now being prom season, the more opportunity that students have to have naughty behaviors. So typically when administered in the fall, the results are typically a little more favorable than what you would see when administered in May. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. The CDC changes the survey from year to year depending on what issues are affecting youth or teenagers. And before they release a survey to an option to the state, they heavily test it. And one of the questions I get the most is this really reliable? And one thing you can do is look at the survey data over time, whether you look at Wallingford or the state data. If kids were answering haphazardly, we're able to catch most of it if there's more than one question per topic. For example, a child that says, I've never had alcohol, and then they're answering about drinking alcohol. So we take that cluster of questions and we toss out all the responses so that we're not going to be in a guessing game as to whether or not they drank. We do that across many clusters of questions, and the CDC offers focus groups, first of all, to make sure the question is asking what we're trying to measure, making sure that it's at a readable level for high schoolers across the nation, that they understand what the question is asking. And sometimes we will have outdated lingo, and the student focus groups help us insert appropriate examples. They come up with really creative names for drugs or texting or whatever they're using nowadays on their phones that they're attached to 24/7.
Can you share that with parents by any chance?
Yes,
Can you share that lingo? That'd be really helpful.
I misunderstood the question,
Share
but now
that
I
with
get it.
parents. We'd love that.
I know. It's overwhelming to keep up with what they're doing, never mind what they're calling it. The 2017 survey was done on October 30th. The previous 2 survey years were done relatively on pretty much the same week. It's always Red Ribbon Week. We're very close to it. So our results show our sample was split, our participants were split a little bit more female-male. I'm not sure what the enrollment figures are for Wallingford Public High Schools, if that's reflective. And then across the 4 grades, it was relatively even. So we had an overall response rate of about 88.9%. And so we had some students that opted themselves out, parents that opted their student out. We had 1 small field trip. We don't survey anyone that's receiving special ed services to a point that they would need somebody to assist with the survey, because that breaches confidentiality, and that's really important to us that we follow that. And we had this other student non-response were surveys that I tossed, that they clearly did not take it seriously, whether I noticed a pattern, 10 A's, 10 B's, it's multiple choice, 10 C's, et cetera, where they answered every possible worst thing you could possibly. Not saying they're not totally honest, but we do take out outliers. I do the same with height and weight. If they say that the tallest they could be is 6'11", 7'11", and 399 pounds. So we had a few. So I'll take out the outliers on some that are illogical as far as height and weight. So we try and clean the data as much as possible.
I know.
Basketball. Yes, basketball. Yeah, basketball. Well, not the wait.
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven.
I wanted to bring back Tony's slide about the spectrum, the continuum of results that we saw. So there were 99 questions on the survey. We will not be going over every single one tonight. We went through and selected some certain topics to highlight, and so I'd like to give just a high-level overview of some of these topics, but we are working on a finalized summary report that does have every single question and the results split out by male-female, grades 9 through 12, and split out by the 2 high schools. Alternative education did participate, but the numbers were too small for us to show their results individually because of confidentiality, but they are included in the general. I believe at that time there were about 9 students that participated from alternative ed. We asked the students, how many drinks of alcohol did you have in the past 30 days? And in 2017, we see that about 2 out of every 10 students, grades 9 through 12, said that they had a drink in the past month. We asked the students if in a short period of time, in the past 30 days, if they had 5 or more alcoholic drinks. About 1 out of every 10 students said yes. We saw some progress, some positive trends in alcohol consumption. We do ask some other behaviors that are related to alcohol. For example, did you come to school if you were drunk or high? And a couple other attitude questions about perception of harm when it comes to using alcohol or binge drinking. I wanted to point this out. We asked the question, the last time you did have alcohol, how did you get it? The vast majority said that someone gave it to me, or I gave somebody money to buy it for me. About 13% said that they bought it by themselves, whether it was at a store, restaurant, bar, or public event. 12% took it from a store or family, and then 18% said some other way. I'm not sure how, I took it from someone else's family, a friend's family.
Yeah.
It could be some other creative way. But accessibility to alcohol is not a struggle for teenagers, I guess is the bottom line.
That's
When looking at mental health indicators, we ask the students, who would you most likely turn to if you were feeling sad, empty, hopeless, angry, or anxious? So the options include a friend, a sibling, an adult at school, school nurse, and we are able to look at each individual response. So in Wallingford, we found that 24% of students said that they would reach out to their parent as the first, most likely to, even before a friend. We find this a little more favorable compared to Connecticut data. That's a positive thing for Wallingford, that research shows that students that have a supportive adult in their life, whether or not they're a parent, it's an extremely protective factor. In our other panel of questions that take a peek at the home life of the teenagers, we asked them, in the past week, did you have at least 3 meals? We asked, how many meals did you have with your family or at home? And we found that 73% said at least 3 meals at home in the past week. Fewer seniors than freshmen. Seniors are out and about and potentially have a job. So this is favorable for Wallingford. This shows a different type of connection or engagement with the family that the student might not realize as necessarily protective. The question for this is, when I am not at home, my parents know where I am and with whom I'm spending my time. 8 out of every 10 students said yes. It was on a scale of 5-point scale on how likely the parents knew.
pretty good.
We asked the students, do your parents have clear rules and consequences for your behavior? And I think in 2015, we asked the same question about, does your school have clear consequences for behavior? And more students said, oh, my school is clear, more so than their parents having clear consequences. This time it was a little more even, but 8 out of 10 students is a wonderful thing for, at least the parents are conveying to their students what the expectations are. We asked the students, does your family give you love, help, and support when needed? And about 8 or 9 out of 10 said yes. This is better than state average. And together with these panel of questions, we do find a protective factor when we look at students that say yes to this question and other risky behaviors are certainly lower than students that are saying, no, I don't feel loved and supported. When we merged all of the parent or family questions together and kind of created a score, it helped get all different aspects of family engagement or connectedness to parents, and that made us feel that we really truly saw something, that this was one of the most, the strongest predictors of healthier behavior, was engagement with parents or family. So to take a peek at depression and suicide, imagine we had 50 Wallingford High School students, varying either male or female and across grades 9 through 12. Let me get my actual figure. I think it was about 11 or 12 said that for a 2-week period, I felt so sad or hopeless that it interfered with me getting through my day. About 7 students out of these 50 said that in the past year, they seriously considered suicide. Out of these 7, 3 attempted suicide.
Oh my God.
And out of these 3, 1 had to seek medical attention, which means 2 attempted and potentially nobody knew because it wasn't injurious enough that they needed medical attention. Statewide data, we're finding that help-seeking behavior is decreasing. We did not see that in Wallingford, which is a positive thing. We found 40% of those that are in the bottom left-hand corner, I have felt sad or hopeless. Oh, I have an animation for this. There we go. So about 4 or 5 of them, just under half of them, said, I got the help I needed when I felt that way. That begs the question, those that said I didn't get the help, did they ask for the help or not? The research shows that the boys are not asking. Tony will talk a little bit more about some of what we categorized as physical health, just general health, healthy habits, very simply healthy habits. We asked the students on the past week, how many days did you have breakfast? I broke this out into 5 out of the past 10 days, assuming that 5 of those days were school days. Less than half had breakfast. We asked the students on how many days in the past week were you active for at least 60 minutes, enough so that it raised your heart rate. And again, less than half are meeting the recommended physical activity requirements. We asked the students, how many energy drinks did you have in the past week? And we can look at this daily, which it was relatively small, so I decided to break this out as a weekly consumption of energy drinks. I believe most of these were boys, but about 2 out of 10 were weekly drinkers of energy drinks. So at this point, October, the end of October, we're 8 weeks into school, probably no major exams, or I don't know about midterm schedules, but that always changes this question.
What are your expectations with that one?
Oh, I think I'm skewed because I just see litter bugs everywhere with the 5-hour energy thrown everywhere. I actually thought it would be slightly higher, but I don't. Maybe it's just seeing adults with it that my thoughts are skewed, and my children aren't quite high school age yet. So, yeah, I just, besides thinking it's grossly unhealthy to be daily consumers of this, I'm not sure if it's healthy to even be weekly consumers of energy drinks at this age when they're growing.
I bet you
That's
though,
what I
if you
needed.
ask college students, that goes up significantly,
That's what
I would think.
That's what I
Yeah.
needed to hear, that last
Right.
comment. I didn't realize it was a concern.
Oh, this one's a doozy. So, recommended for this age group hours of sleep actually has been revised to high school ages should be going back to about 8 or 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah, that's never gonna happen.
So I get so few students saying that they get the recommended 8 hours of sleep that I break this out into 6 or fewer hours. So more than half of them are getting insufficient sleep. And gambling for money or possessions, we have a panel of questions pinpointing exactly what type of gambling: internet, games of skill, state lottery, sports. Trying to think which other categories. Majority are boys. Personal skills, sports, cards and dice games, yes. So majority are male, so it's 4 out of every 10 male students, about 2 out of every 10 female students, about 1 out of 3 students overall in the past year admit to gambling for money or possessions. I had a group of students approach me about 10 years ago that said, your survey, because we can modify the survey, they said, your survey's missing something really important that we see in our high school, and it was really unhealthy dating relationships. So Connecticut has had a panel of dating violence questions on their survey since 2007. So about 30%, or about 3 out of 10 girls, say that they have been in a emotional, verbal, or controlling relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend. 2 out of every 10 males. 1 out of every 10 females say it was physically abusive, and the rate for boys was less than 1 out of 10, but about 7.5%. And sexually abusive is, my boyfriend or girlfriend made me do something sexual that I wasn't comfortable with. So this is not signifying rape. So almost 2 out of every 10 girls admitted that they did something pressured in a sexual relationship. About 8.6% of boys said the same.
Going back to that one, the clarification is, though, that there would be a question that would weed out who answers this question, right? Because is there an
Correct.
initial question that says, have you been in a relationship?
The answer option, the first answer option is, I haven't been in a dating relationship. So this is among those that were in a dating relationship in the past year.
So the percentage, that's where, do we know what the percentage that were in a dating relationship?
Let me see this.
Because that wouldn't be out of 100%.
No.
So it's a higher percentage considering the number's small.
Well, that's that's where I'm going.
Yeah, the denominator, so if I included all students in this, it would probably be 10%. So
Yeah.
it would water it down if I included the non-dating.
Exactly.
Right.
But the fact is that, because again, you can't, this isn't based on the point, because you're right there with me, it's not based on the 1,700 students that
No.
took the survey. This is on
Correct.
much-
Only those that said I was in a relationship in the past year.
But that percentage is a high percent.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this data allows us to get estimates of each individual behavior, but the most benefit from this data is being able to look at a population, a smaller population. Let's put a magnifying glass on freshman girls or senior boys, or something that we could look at who's at elevated risk. Is it those that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual? Is it students that have an IEP? Is it students that say, I've tried marijuana? So we can look to see what's protective and where do we see higher risk. So those are our next steps as far as the data side goes, is to just dig a little deeper so that we can help identify potentially some vulnerable populations that might need some better messaging as far as prevention and protection. And in the past, we were able to do some specialized reports that looked at students that reported a 2-week episode of depression or feeling sad or hopeless, and looking at their risk behaviors. Students that reported they gambled in the past year, and these were highly correlated to grades at school. And the bottom 2 were those highest correlated to the least amount of risky behavior. So students that were getting A's and B's, and students that reported feeling love and support from their family. So that's what I will be moving to next and providing to all the folks around the table.
Celeste, did you guys do any questions tied to opioid use specific? I mean, obviously that's such a hot button today.
Right. We looked at students that admitted to not having a prescription but using or taking an opioid in over their life or in the past 12 months. Wallingford opted to add the 12-month question.
Okay.
And it's relatively low. However, they are experimenting with it. So it was less than 10%. Yeah, it's not going down. The rate did not improve from 2015.
Thank you.
I'm going to wrap things up, and we can certainly have questions as we go. Again, the one of the major values of having administered this survey 3 years is we can start to gather some longitudinal data and really see trends in where we're going. And that's how we determined, are we making clear progress? Are we taking steps back? What are our major concerns? And so we saw growth in alcohol consumption, and you can clearly see here over the 3 administrations of this survey, the 6 years, we saw a drop from 27% down to 23%, down to 22% of alcohol consumption amongst our students. Another area of growth for us was mostly getting help when feeling sad. So we had an increase, and Celeste had highlighted that. At this point, we're at 41%. We started at 29%. So kids are reaching out more when they're feeling sad. So obviously, this is a positive trend that we want to go for, and it means kids are advocating and speaking up for their needs and what they have. So mental health, we saw gains and we saw setbacks. Students that hurt themselves on purpose over the past 12 months, we saw a decline in that, so that's a plus. But we saw a slight increase in the number of students that considered suicide in the past 12 months. So we are making improvements, but we still have a ways to go, and this is still clearly a focus for us. Family engagement, again, gains and setbacks. Agree that family has clear rules and consequences. That increased. We aren't missing part of this. We did not ask this question in 2013, but between the last administration and this one, we saw an increase. Parents never or rarely know whereabouts. That has increased from around 5% up to 10%. So there's still areas for improvement here. Our areas of concern, our major areas of concern were the physical health, dating violence, and gambling. For physical health, what's the news? Try and make things simple for the students in order to better help them. Nutrition, exercise, water, and sleep. So when we're talking about physical health, these are the areas that make it kind of simple for the kids to understand. If this is the area we want to improve in, it's these 4 issues that we need to work on and improve. So as far as nutrition, the number of students that had breakfast on all the past 7 days, we know that has declined, and we have to get better with that. The students that are active 60 minutes in the past 5 days, those numbers have declined. Water, and this ties back to Mr. Votto, what he was referring to. What do we expect to do with this? If kids are drinking a lot of energy drinks, we need to emphasize the importance of drinking water and how that will help overall in the long run.
Question on breakfast.
Yes.
Do you kind of narrow it down, as far as what they're eating?
No.
Yeah.
No, that gets that would be a little too specific. Surveys 99 questions, so it's
I'm just worried,
tough.
especially,
Yeah.
it was a long time ago when I was a teenager, but nutrition.
Mhm.
Thinking like, well, I eat breakfast every day. Yeah, I had last night's, Kentucky Fried Chicken. So I was just curious to see if the kids
yeah.
are, kind of like, we should have these food groups.
As far as breakfast goes, Kentucky Fried Chicken is better than going to school starving, and so the message is, yes, we're trying to teach our students about healthy choices. We do have some great programs in the physical education, especially at the elementary level, as far as snack attack and teaching the kids these are good snacks, bad snacks. But the big message is you got to eat. It's so important.
So Tony,
Yes,
with
Kath.
respect again to breakfast,
Yeah.
does the survey ask, is it specific to a time? In other words, does it say something like before you go to school? Because a lot of the high school kids may be grabbing the grab-and-go breakfast. Is that considered or not?
The time is not taken into consideration. It's
But I
have
wonder
you
how
had
many of the kids are
breakfast?
thinking,
Um,
I left home without breakfast and not thinking of the
True.
grab-and-go as breakfast. I don't know.
Perhaps that's some clarification that we could put into
Yeah.
the next time.
Yeah.
So, and then sleep, and we talked about that, the importance of getting 8 hours of sleep and how difficult that is. And again, tying this to Healthy Wallingford 2020, Eat, Play, Unplug, all these together are part of that initiative, we believe. Big area of concern was the dating violence. Celeste very, very eloquently was able to express these numbers. Here you can see the trend, how they've slightly gone up for the physical abuse by a boy or girlfriend in the past 12 months, sexual abuse by the past 12 months. And what all this means is, what are we going to do about it? We have these numbers now, and I had touched upon that. Our strategic plans are coming up, and this data is so helpful in helping us figure out the best action to take and the best course to take. So for mental health, we have a second step program that We've been piloting this year at the elementary schools to help kids make right decisions and collaborate and work well together. At the secondary level, we have a peer support group that is coming together. We also have resources, 13 Reasons Why and QPR training that I'm looking into for next year and bringing forward. For family engagement, I think we should connect with our community partnerships and really try to get parents engaged. It's a fine line. We don't want to tell parents or make parents feel like they're doing a bad job, but we want them to know that there are services available and that we have information that I think could be useful and helpful. As far as physical health, we have curriculum updates that we're going through. Summer planning, I think, could be huge, and we'll certainly put that into the strategic plan. By summer planning, I mentioned the fact that over the summer, a lot of kids gain weight compared to during the school year. And so physical education teachers should be coming up with a plan and working with their students and trying to prepare them to be active during the summer and motivate them to come back and share their movement and fun experiences. Dating violence, again, curriculum updates with our health teachers and bringing guest speakers in. And then as far as gambling goes, I attend the Regional 2 Gambling Awareness Team. There's an intersection of youth and gaming and gambling professional development that I've gone to. They have wonderful ideas that I hope to bring here to Wallingford. A couple more ideas for policy or program implications. I hope that we can include this survey in the middle school level. It's as valid as the high school survey. It's developmentally appropriate with the language and the questions. And I know our health teachers at the middle school level, one of which was a teacher of the year for his school, are pining for this information, this data to help drive their instruction and to help best reach our students. Yes?
Along those lines, are we continuing to educate the teachers on what to recognize, the dangers of a child hurting themselves, or signs to look for? I mean, you're in the business long enough to kind of know that. But you have newer teachers coming in, and I don't know, is there professional development that does that sort of thing?
There absolutely is.
The teachers are key because they see the kids all day long.
There absolutely is, and I had the honest pleasure of working with a student this past year at one of our high schools who, for her capstone project, created a professional development experience for teachers specifically on how to better interact with students with anxiety and depression. And it's something that we're going to continue in the future. And there's other avenues in order to train teachers. A few years ago, teachers were trained in the QPR training, question, persuade, refer. And I'm looking, again, next year I will be bringing that back. At one point we did it just for teachers, then the next year just for parents. So I want to follow up and do it for all community members, again, going forward. But you're absolutely right. That's a huge piece, and that will certainly be a part of the strategic plan. One huge, I believe, issue that was not asked was any questions around vaping and e-cigarettes. Talking to our administrators at our secondary schools, it seems like this is becoming more and more of an issue. And so even though it wasn't part of the survey, it is something that the district will certainly be coming up with ideas for how to combat that and how to help turn that around.
Do you guys have questions about tobacco use in general?
Yeah.
I thought
Yes.
that you guys did. Yeah,
Yes.
I thought so.
There's a lot of confusion amongst kids and e-cigarettes or vaping compared to cigarettes. And they're under this misconception, very clear misconception, that, oh, it's totally healthy, it's just water vapor.
Right.
And actually today, or yesterday, the FDA came out and they basically said if a kid ingests any amount of nicotine, it will negatively affect their brain. Any amount. And that's what's in these vaping and e-cig things. So it's certainly something that we want to address.
Tony, just a quick question. I think this goes back to what Celeste said earlier. You're going to be doing the crosstab data analysis, and then I don't recall. I think I recall we looked at. Did we look at cohort data? The students that were freshmen in 2015 who would now be juniors, the students who were sophomores who would be seniors, because that would help us understand the data a little bit. If the progress is being made, what grade levels, or are we dipping? I don't know if there's a way to do that. I'd volunteer to help because I think that data is the questions for all grades are the same.
So your point
There were
being
all,
that-
and there was no difference between yeah, but back in 13 was a different assessment, but 15 and 17 were the same one. So we had the exact same survey. Yeah, I knew. Yeah, so I don't know if we could. It'd be kind of.
Yeah.
I think it'd be valuable information to see if a freshman's mind has changed
Yeah.
from to junior year.
So we have, we can speak to that, but. Sure. So we break it out every year, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
So we could just if.
So you can just look at the number each year.
Right.
So what we'll do is, Mr. Loomis and I will work on doing that for the board because I think that would be valuable to see that comparison.
Because I would think risky behavior will increase, any of those options would increase as they get older, potentially. No? I
Yes,
mean,
as
We
they
could
have more
look at the
options.
increase.
They have a car, they have more
Exactly.
independence.
We could look at the increase of 2000, certain questions, the majority of the questions were the same in 2013.
Yeah, there was only that one little group that we
right.
added about family. And the other part about this, because this presentation, I'm assuming we'll put as part of the board presentation, it goes there. I would just ask, because I think it may be confusing, maybe I'm the only one who has this confusion. When we say family engagement, I just think there needs to be more to that statement. So I don't know if there was a comment, Celeste, you made, connectedness to parents and family. I think I might label it that because I think family engagement, depending on the audience, is it family engagement with the school district? Is it family engagement with the student? Is it family?
There's a lot of literature right now of getting the parent engaged with the school. We're talking about the parent engaged
Yeah.
with their own child.
Exactly. So I didn't.
That's why I started saying
I
family
like-
engagement. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked
Connectedness
connectedness to
instead of
parents and
engagement.
family. I like that. So if we, just those little subtleties when people read the data or read the slideshow, they might not.
I'll make sure we adjust that. And again, it was this fine line. We want to emphasize the positive, and there were a lot as far as the family engagement goes. And we want to be sensitive to parents and not make parents feel bad, not come across as telling parents how they should be doing things. And so we'll certainly make those adjustments. The last slide I have for you is something a colleague provided to me, and this comes from the Wallingford Public Schools 21st Century Innovation Project. This was in 2013, and we're looking at our career and college readiness. And I know that's a major focus for us, and we have this whole section on social emotional learning. And I just wanted to underscore that the survey results are going to help us emphasize and better teach the SEL to our students and moving forward. So if I'll open the floor up to questions. I really, again, thank you for your time. And actually, before you ask any questions, I want to thank Celeste George from, again, the Connecticut State Department of Public Health. Her expertise in this area and her professionalism and her donation of her time and energy to helping us navigate this is just incredible, and so we are beyond grateful. And also Youth and Social Services for helping provide this survey and the Coalition for Better Wallingford, so certainly.
So just to respond to you, Sal. It's not going anywhere. So, yeah, there are two.
You're the 7-Eleven.
I ain't, not 390.
Yeah, right.
My other half. So looking at the data, just to follow up on what you said, so I think looking at how an individual is changing is very important. That's one of the two pieces. What we have seen in the data since 13 to 17 is that seniors as a population in areas have improved their behavior. So seniors are acting better now than they did in 2013. So that's an important distinction. Because you are going to see, as Roxanne indicated, that as kids get older, more independent, they're driving, they're away from their parents, they have a job, they have discretionary income, they're more likely to drink more than they would have when they were a freshman, a sophomore, or a junior. We know that. But the rate at which that is happening is decreased. Statistically significant in that domain. So that when you look at the data, make sure you look at both pieces, because there's the norm across an individual's growth pattern, and then there's the comparison from one class to another, which is really as significant for us, because that goes to the community issue in reaching parents. For us, is it making a difference how they're communicating with their kids? Because if seniors are reducing risky behaviors, there has to be something going on in that kid's life from somewhere other than internally to have that happen. That's not just an attitude shift. Other people are involved in either watching or encouraging or educating that kid so they're making a better decision than they were. That doesn't happen very often. So that's really good news for us.
No, thank you. That's what I was hoping for. And with all the work that the coalition has done over the last couple of years with getting family involvement, doing the different activities to get family coming together at night, doing the whole idea of having dinner with families, having their meals, the whole campaign. I mean, those things are important. And I think I was hoping and I kind of was wishing that there was, a positive impact. So we'll look at that. I think by grade level, I think makes the most sense. So thank you.
So I just wanted to ask, I don't know, either Mr. Turner or Celeste, Milford is now doing a parent survey on risky behavior, which you're probably aware of. Some of the things they're asking parents is their knowledge about social hosting. Do they know where the Dropbox is in town? Do they think it's possible for education to reduce alcohol and drug use? Are they concerned about the alcohol and drug use? They're asking parents about vaping. They're asking parents if they know that fake IDs are on the internet. And they're asking parents how much they think these risky behaviors are just normal teenage behaviors versus whether or not they think that the children can really hurt themselves. Do you have any idea if this is their first go round at it, or have you seen any other results, and what do you think about the value in it?
I haven't seen it, and I'm wondering if it's voluntary, just a web link that's sent out. So
It was tweeted by the Milford Prevention, which is the officer who came to speak at DAG.
Okay.
It was under their.
yeah, I'd be interested in the data, but I'd be also curious who's likely to respond to that survey.
I didn't take it.
You
I
know,
just
a
went
more
through and wrote down the
engaged-
questions.
No,
just-
I'm wondering if their data's really going to give an accurate picture of the parents' perception of the problem. We find the parents most engaged with the schools, and their kids are the ones likely to reply to,
Right. think they
being
were at least-
solicited. But
The questions about the fake IDs, that one, as an engaged parent, that one kind of surprised me. But then the question about asking parents about vaping, I was pleasantly surprised to see that in the mix.
yeah, that's great. I have a middle schooler, and she tells me the whole back of the bus are vaping, the 8th graders, and I'm just floored.
I know.
Because it's her first year in middle school. So, and I'm pretty, deep. No, I'm not in Wallingford. I lived in Wallingford 20 years ago. More than that, my gosh. But I lost my train of thought thinking about how old I am.
The back of the bus.
But, yeah, in the back of the bus, the behavior is not indicative, of course, what's going on in the classroom, but it's just a shock value of, what's going on that the parents are not aware of. So getting it addressed by administrators, is that going, who's the audience? Who reads the emails and whatever? I'd love to see actually a cell phone survey, seeing the registry of cell phones of parents and reaching out to them and
Right.
being a little more proactive in getting a representative sample. But I'll look into what's going on in Milford. That's always interesting to see
Thank
the
you.
parents' perception.
Most of those.
Can you come to the microphone? Sorry.
I'm a little familiar with the Milford thing, and most of those questionnaires were handed out at school events where they had an assembly of parents. So that's the big problem, is getting them together so you can access them. Because, as you can imagine, the results are a little questionable if they're not there and they're prepared by the person giving the questionnaire as to what they're doing about it. So they tried a lot of different methods, and the thing that worked the best was showing up at school when the parents were there and telling them that that was going to happen, talking about some of the problems like we do, but then being able to give them a questionnaire and get that feedback. So, and we'd love to be able to do that.
Again, it's the awareness of being able to ask the question and start the conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
Dr. Menzo.
First of all, we'd be happy to consider that. I could speak for myself as superintendent. We haven't had a conversation yet, so I look forward to that first conversation about that opportunity. Secondly, in terms of the middle school survey, I want to go back to that because we have had a conversation about that one. And I would wholeheartedly support the district looking at that. So I don't know when a timeline would be, because I know the board would want to go over the questions, make sure they're appropriate. That's what we did the first time we went through the questions. We went through all of that. But I would be at least interested in investigating that a little bit further, because the sooner we can get some information to be preventative in, especially my gravest concerns, no offense to the health and wellness of obesity and things, I apologize, but my biggest concern is the emotional issues and the anxiety and the suicide, and they could be complicated and connected to the physical. So I don't want to disregard that, because there is definitely some, if your self-image is low because you're not taking care of yourself, or you don't know how to, or you're not getting, the appropriate nutrition for whatever reason, then that could relate to anxiety and social issues and then lead to depression and such. But I was hoping that the board would at least, if I could just mention that we'd like to come back to you if it's not this year, because obviously we only have a couple more months left, but if at the very least in the fall, if we could come back and at least share with you what the middle school survey looks like, what our intent would be, if that's something that the board would be in support of, at least seeing, not necessarily saying that we have to, but I just think it's worth investigating personally as superintendent. So do we have, it appears I'm getting,
Yes.
is there?
Support that.
Okay.
Support that.
All right, thank you, because I know we didn't want to go, Mr. Welch and I talked about this back in the fall, and we were kind of like, okay, let's get through this year's survey first, let's bite off just a little bit, let's get another successful administration with Celeste's amazing support and hard work, and then we can go forward with the next one. And I know, Mr. Turner, you were supportive also. Okay.
So just for the
Oh, the microphone, please. Sorry.
So, for the sake of the new members, welcome to the team, and thank you for your commitment to our children. So the fact that we have a position such as Tony that kind of spearheads the school system's effort using this data is really powerful. I'm sure those of you who were here when we first started this, if you compare where we were then to where we are now, we are seemingly well more than 5 years, 6 years ahead of where we were. It's actually a phenomenal leap forward in terms of the planning and the strategic effort and the focus. And the one thing that I saw from the community side, from the work that we do and working with the coalition, is the involvement of parents that are either engaged through the PTAC process or other groups really made a significant difference in the 15 data. That 2015 data really reflects some of the involvement of parents. You may know that the townwide PTAC actually had a subcommittee to specifically address the underage drinking element. And surprise, surprise, the underage numbers are lower across the board. So I can't say it's a causal effect, but we know the correlation is definitely there. So we also know that when we were in doing the presentations in the driver's ed, those numbers decreased dramatically. We were not in there for this group that would have been surveyed, and you'll see that those numbers have bumped up. So it's really important to know that where we make inroads, it makes a difference, but they need to be sustained. Because if they're not sustained, we know those numbers will go right back, because without that kind of involvement, those kids are prone to go right back to where they are. So the commitment you've made has really been the primer for this thing getting off the ground and making the difference. So I appreciate that, and I know the town appreciates that as well. Yes?
Bullying in the survey, is that addressed?
Excuse me?
Bullying?
Yes.
And we actually saw numbers. We actually saw some numbers go down for bullying, and obviously that's in the positive direction. And as far as all the results go, again, you heard that the state results have not come out yet, and I personally would prefer to wait for that to happen, and then I can provide all of you with our data over the 3 administrations compared to the latest state data, just so we can see where we are. And as soon as that comes out, I'll make sure I compile that and get that to you. So, Patty.
Just a quick comment. I just want to relate to what you were saying, and that what you just said about the bullying.
Yeah.
That the research I've done has shown that children that are obese and overweight are actually the #1 target for bullying. So there is a connection to the physical too.
Yeah, certainly. And again, to Craig's point and to Dr. Menzo's point, maybe the PTAC is where we go to for the emotional, social emotional aspect and the mental health aspect, and we aren't going to ignore any of these concerns, the physical health, the gambling. We are going to come up with a plan to try and address all of this. And again, that piece, I'm definitely seeing the PTAC as being a major area to help us move forward with that. So,
Well, at our next meeting, which is next Tuesday, right? We have actually a brief presentation on second step, and that was asked for by parents. So we are definitely growing that understanding, and we do get a very nice turnout at system-wide PTAC. Usually it's every school is represented that has a PTAC, and so we're very fortunate. So I see a great opportunity for us to work in that area. And maybe even with the parent survey, if that's an approach, we can utilize them. We also, just going back to the parent survey, if that's something, again, that the board wants to pursue, we do have, and we had very good success, Celeste, you mentioned it quickly, we have access with our school messenger system to do a phone survey. And we did this 2 years ago, was it? We did it with, Karen was the one who came up with it. It was awesome. And it calls the person's phone number, and if you take the phone survey, you don't take the internet survey. And we had a response rate that was so high because people took the phone survey. It was short, so it wasn't where you could do like 25 questions. But even if we say that we pick a 5 to 6 questions, we might get a good response rate, in addition to the physical connecting with people. Yeah, so it's just something, when you said that, Celeste, I turned to Karen and I said, we had good rates with that. That technology data was extremely helpful. And it was also in Spanish too, so they could select Spanish.
This survey for Wallingford was translated, so the majority of language learners that were bilingual in Spanish were able to take this, but other languages, they weren't able to. So I just wanted to include that. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you all for coming down tonight and presenting that information. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you for your time.
Tony? Your T limits, that right there. Thank you. Okay. Let me get my... Okay, next on our list, we are going to talk about curriculum and possible consensus. We're going to start with some high school German units. Welcome.
Welcome. I thought maybe you were going to say something in German, but I don't.
What can I say in
Tune,
German?
baby.
Yeah.
That's all.
Auf Wiedersehen, but not yet.
Oh,
Well, auf
Yeah, that was
Wiedersehen.
the same
album.
Dog in German. I knew dog in German. but I
I've learned a lot of German through this curriculum revision process, but not dog.
My sister-in-law is from Germany. Speaks German. From Germany.
So I guess to kind of paint a broad stroke, what you have in front of you are the first 3 units of German 1, 2, and 3. And then on June 4th, Mr. Fleischman and I are hoping to bring forward units 4, 5, and 6 for German 1, 2, and 3. So this is the first real revision of German in the UBD template over the last handful of years or so. It's only offered at Sheehan. And German 4 has not run in a handful of years, so we'll probably look at updating German 4, if and when the need arises. If we're looking at a cohort of 3s that aren't all seniors, and it looks probable that we'll have a 4. So German 4 is something that is in our program of studies, but it's not a course that runs regularly enough to kind of merit, at this point, the amount of time that goes into curriculum writing. So the way that our German program is set up, each section of 3 units is set in a different federal state of Germany. So you'll see that those first 3 units of German 1, I think, are set in Braeburn, and German 2 begins in Munich. So everything kind of has this cultural undertone. So any online ancillaries that the students use, there's really a foundation through the lens of that cultural state, which is how we've built this program, which is a nice thing to note. Do any of you have any questions after you've read through the?
I just have a question. How many students roughly you think are taking German in our district? I'm just curious.
Probably 50, I would think.
Okay.
We usually have between 15 and 20 in German 1 and 2, and then between 12 and 15 in German 3.
Thank you.
So it's a 0.6, and next year will continue to be a 0.6 teacher at Sheehan.
Okay.
Quick question. How many students are coming from the
From Lyman Hall?
east, the Lyman Hall side?
I don't know. Not more than 10 and not less than 5. I don't know exactly. And it is a commitment, so if you come from Lyman Hall side of town, the expectation is that you're engaged in a course for all 4 years of study at Sheehan that is not available at Lyman Hall.
So how does that work if we're not running
if we're not running German 4? Right. So there's one student that's doing an independent study of German 4 this year, but I believe he's on the Sheehan side of town. So that might beg a larger question if we have Lyman Hall students coming over that then are not engaging in the reason that they came over for all 4 years.
Do we track that?
We are now, as Carrie just said.
Well, that must be true for Latin too.
Yeah,
Do we
it's-
offer Latin for
We
years?
do.
Correct.
Okay, so that's an anomaly
Yes,
in German.
So the thing is that what we had with German, and I just recently had 2 requests, and we had that pocket redistricting back in 2009, 10, 11. So we had some students on some streets that were on either the Sheehan side, Lyman Hall side. So we have a couple of students who are taking German in that group, but they've been in Sheehan already. I haven't seen any requests this year because they usually come through me and then I pass them along. The Latin is probably a larger number. The thing that we're doing in Power School that Carrie and Karen worked on is that we're making sure that not just homeschool, we have to make sure the right homeschool is in a person's profile. In the past, they would change the homeschool sometimes when the student went to a new school, even though that wasn't really their homeschool. So we've made some adjustments so the data will be cleaner. But Kim and I could work together on getting those numbers, and I could put those out for you by Friday.
And
as to
correct
some
me
of
if
the
I'm wrong,
history.
but I'm thinking of a specific example. A student can forego taking the course on the other side of town, and then they just forego the crosstown bus. So we did have a student, I believe, stop taking German, but continue to go to Sheehan and just opt out
It
of the
depends. There's a
transportation.
lot of variations, and depends on those circumstances.
It must
So-
be in
So
my
that-
head.
So that's another possibility too, I think.
Yeah, that's a conversation, a larger conversation, and that was one of the reasons why we're doing
Yeah.
the registering the way that we're doing it, because when the students were registered at Sheehan, for example, we'll just pick Sheehan. It could be Lyman Hall too. They would change their home school. So when the student dropped the course, nobody would pick up on the fact that that student shouldn't be going to that school because
Right.
the home school said the school that they were in at that time. So unless you knew the person's address, and that's when it pops up, because then I'll get a request from a family who sees their neighbor who's going to Sheehan, not taking, and again, I'm just using Sheehan as an example, going to Sheehan, taking German. Well, my child could go to Sheehan too. They don't have to take German because my neighbor. Then when we went into Power School and we saw home school Sheehan, when it should have been maybe Lyman Hall, the can of worms was opened. So that can has been closed. And we're trying to just gradually move out of that. That is something that we already talked to Mr. Loomis in his new role with guidance, because that is a guidance function, is to look at the residency of students. We've done a lot of adjustments in that area, but that's exactly what happened this year. And I was faced with circumstance, and I went into Power School, and it showed that the student was really, homeschool was that school, and it didn't make sense. When I pulled up my little transportation book that Mary Ann does every year in transportation, the street didn't match up. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to just have that information, because I know as my kids went through, it was well known across town, if you want to play sports on this side, you take German, or you want to play on that side, you take Latin. And I want to be sure that it's
well, and
truly
that's part of my questions with the families that are making this decision, and that's why it's been frustrating. This was a little bit frustrating when I found this out, because I would have interviews with families and get the commitment. And I had some people who said, well, yeah, it was sports. And I'm like, well, sorry, you're staying. And they were honest. And I'm saying, I think most families strive to be honest. But I don't want to get caught in that, because that's a CIAC violation. And I do not want to be that district. So that's where we are looking at it. And so I know there's some solutions out there that I'm lobbing to one board member. But no, so I appreciate that. So I will, Ms. Moore and I will look to get the data of Latin students based on homeschool versus the school they're in, and also German. We can get that for you. So.
Great. Thank you. Do we need to take consensus on the German? Is anybody opposed to me doing A, B, and C as a group? German units?
Not at all.
Okay, so let's take consensus on our proposed adoption of our new high school German units, letters A, B, and C on the agenda.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, thank you. Latin at the honors level. Kim?
So our next agenda item, Latin 2, all of our world language courses are offered at the academic level for level 1 and 2, and then they automatically shift to only an honors offering for levels 3 and above. And this is what we do, this is what we have done since before I've been here. This is what it's been for the 5 languages that we offer. Over the last 2 years, really 3 years, we've really been looking closely at Latin. And the fact that it's a classical language versus a modern language begs a lot of different things. And when we overlay what the students in Latin 2 academic are doing versus what the students in level 2 academic and all of our other languages are doing, there's a grave difference. What we are expecting of students in Latin 2, and this has come actually from the students and the parents. They came to the teacher, and the teacher and I really started to look at this and say, all right, let's compare this to our other languages. And for many reasons, Latin is sort of an anomaly. The grammar that the students are interacting with at level 2 is the grammar that our students are interacting with in levels 3 and 4 in all 4 of the other languages. So there are 3 main tenses in Latin, the subjunctive, the imperfect, and the pluperfect. The students learn them in level 2. In all of our other languages, we kind of view levels 1 through 4 as like the amassing of the tools, and then in levels 5 and 6 for the languages where we offer 5 and 6, you're putting it to use with a lot of current events themes. Latin is our only language that we start at the high school level where the students can get to the AP level by senior year. So that's another big kind of push for why what these students are doing in level 2 Latin is of honors rigor. So in 3 years, they're getting ready to take a college course. And in French and Spanish, it's 5 years that the students have before they're getting ready to take a college level course. So the grammar that they're engaging with at level 2, the fact that level 2 is kind of the middle of the road in the 3 courses before they get to AP, which is really what level 3 looks like for French and Spanish. And also when we look at the authentic texts that the students are engaging with in level 2 Latin, it's on a different planet, that language. It really is. The students are reading Ovid and Caesar and the Gaelic Wars and Virgil, and they're reading these things in level 2. It's a tremendous accolade to our teacher and to our students that we've constructed this curriculum that has our students. And Erin, I think you asked a few months ago how many of our AP language students take the AP exam. Latin is where our students are taking the AP exam and they're passing it. This is a program that's incredible to have built in, Cheshire offers AP Latin, but Cheshire starts Latin in middle school. So this is an incredible program, and what the students need to be doing in level 2 in order to ensure the fidelity of this program is honors work. There's no way to make the course, Catherine, we first started with the curriculum resource team knowing, all right, this is an anomaly. We're looking to have a course be offered at an honors level at level 2, and none of our other courses are. So there were no other content areas. That was kind of Carrie's idea for a good first step. Are there other content areas that we have where there is sort of an anomaly course? And there weren't. Then I brought the idea to management team where we have high school representation from both schools, even though this doesn't directly impact Sheehan, but the ripple effect might of offering an anomaly course in the program. And I was also a little bit fearful that the other world language teachers would worry that this would either open up a can of worms or that this would potentially pull students away from their language towards Latin. The other teachers in our department are so on board with this. They recognize the level of work that's happening in Latin. And from there, we went to the high school principals meeting. And there were a couple fears that were voiced there, but I think in talking through them, the Lyman Hall principal especially didn't want to scare students away from the program. But the reality with Latin is that the program is the program. So it's the students that go into Latin 2 are only the students that came from Latin 1. It's not like this is determining someone's participation in the course or not. And the students and parents are the ones that are strongly saying the expectation of what we're doing in this class is greater than the expectation of what we're doing in some of our honors classes. So in talking it through with Mr. Corso, and Mr. Daly actually signed our proposal with Mr. Corso's consent since he wasn't here. But the teacher, Mr. Corso, and I really talked through the fears that he had about, does this affect the sustainability of the program? Does this deter non-honors kids? And we really settled on, no, it doesn't. It rewards students for the work that they're doing. And Catherine and I have actually made some revisions as of late to things that have to go into level 2 in order for level 4 to happen the way that it needs to happen and be true to what the College Board's expecting. So there are some changes that we've made this year. 2 of those 3 grammar points that I mentioned earlier needing to be mastered in full at level 2 that make it different than what our level 2 has been in past years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so to clarify, are you eliminating academic, and is it level, so level 2 is going to be just honors, and then what about level 3?
Level 3 is already just an honors course.
And then you go to AP.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So Latin is.
Then why not make well? They're changing their academic to honors, but why not start with Latin 1?
Mr. Corso brought that up as well, and I think that's a phenomenal idea. If it's not kind of too much to do all at once,
I don't know if that's a turnoff for students to see that it starts right off as an honors course. Maybe it's nice to gradually bring them in. I don't know, but
that could possibly be.
I mean, if you think about it too, I mean, we have a weighted grading system, so it's important for these students to get credit for the hard work that they're putting out based on what you're saying, the type of work they're doing. I don't know. I just something I wonder.
He did mention, is this an honors program?
Yeah.
Almost.
Mr. Votto?
Isn't the content the same, basically, what you're doing now and calling it an honors course? Is it just the name that's really?
A little
You're
bit.
making it
And
sound like Latin 2 is a very rigorous course.
it's a
already.
very rigorous course, and it always has been, right?
Right.
So there are minor modifications that have been made to the curriculum that make it even more so.
And there's
But
only one Latin 2 class, correct?
there will be 2 sections of it next year.
There'll be 2 sections.
And next year, we have 51 registrants for Latin 1, which is an incredible,
That was
again,
gonna be my next
accolade to
question. Are your numbers going
that
up?
program, yes. And we have, for next year, we have 15 students enrolled in Latin AP, which is our largest ever in the 4 years.
So how many sections of Latin do you have altogether right now?
5, and there will be 6 next year.
So again, you're
And
basically.
there'll be 2 big sections of one. It'll be a 25 and a 26, so it's exciting.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For Spanish, students who are taking Spanish and getting to AP Spanish by senior year, they're getting to that Spanish 6.
Mm-hmm.
So when they come in, they're taking Spanish 3 at the honors level.
Mm-hmm.
So these Latin kids
about
are
half
almost,
of our Spanish students will come in at 3, and then some will come in at 2 and some at 1.
but the ones who get to AP Spanish as a senior
Mhm.
are starting at Spanish 3 as a freshman,
Mm-hmm.
and that's an honors level course.
Mm-hmm.
So Latin is almost at a disadvantage because their weighted GPA,
Mm-hmm.
if they're getting an A in Latin 2 currently, that's an academic level
Right.
course.
That's what,
The
that was my
same
point.
students are
Right.
getting an A in an honors level course taking Spanish 4 and the
Mhm.
same in grade 10. So
Right.
I wonder if it would be worth looking into taking a look at that grade 9 as an honors level,
Mm-hmm.
just because to make it equitable and
Yeah, that was
fair
my
across
point.
the board.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's certainly fair to look at when you think of what we typically do in a modern language in levels 1 and 2 happens in Latin 1. And even when you look at the authentic text that they need to engage with in Latin 1, it doesn't compare to what happens in a modern language. And then the grammar points that we usually tackle in levels 3 and 4 for the modern languages are in Latin 2. So even just the expedited nature of Latin in order for our students to get to AP is fodder for looking at the whole program. So I guess we figured we would hopefully start with the approval of 2, and we could certainly look at it from there if it seems like something that is supported.
Any other questions or comments? Patty?
Yeah, just, so the rigor of Latin 1 as a freshman compared to what you're doing in Spanish, coming in as Spanish 3, I guess, as a freshman, right? Some people,
We
are they
have
still,
about
are they,
60 and 80 students come in at level
but I mean,
3.
are they similar? Because that's what you have to be to get on track to AP.
Yeah, it's a very different language. There is no oral proficiency piece. So a lot of students regardless of how successful they were with the language they were studying in middle school, it caters to a different type of student. And there's a whole historical study component that's a much bigger part of Latin than there is of the modern languages. So sometimes it ends up being a student who's more of a historian than a language person. Sometimes it ends up, oftentimes it's just a different type of student than takes a modern language. But it is fair to say that I would think the rigor of output that we're expecting in a level 3 modern language and Latin 1 is comparable. And
Okay.
certainly Latin 2 is more so.
Okay.
Dr. Menzo?
May I ask that in preparation for future discussion about level 1 being honors,
Mm-hmm.
could we get some information from our DIRG and other districts as to how they're handling it? And obviously, keeping track of the districts that have Latin offered at the middle school. I would also, since Latin is the gatekeeper to so many different things, I'd be intrigued as to investigating proposal in the future for potentially introducing some of it at the middle school.
Yeah, that was my next.
So if you could, if I can get some more information on that personally.
So
I don't know
specifically on Latin or on
Well,
other districts that start level 1 languages at an honors
I think there's two
level?
different questions. First, high schools that only start Latin at the high school level, how many of them call it an honors course? Then, second question is looking at our who have middle school programs in Latin. How is that working? Ms. Raccio,
Like, would you change middle schools if I want to take Latin in middle school?
Well, no, that's where we have to, and that's where it goes back to our other larger discussion that we're getting closer to having about the I mean, this is about future programming.
Gotcha.
So in planning, because yeah, I wouldn't want to have that.
You'd be busy.
Yeah, that's a lot. So, but I think it's something to consider. There's so much connected to Latin. It's one thing I do regret not listening to my parents in high school.
The one thing.
The one thing. I'll go on record. Only
Mr.
one.
Votto?
Was it about middle school?
Really, you think?
I could tell he was like,
50-some-odd kids that you talked about for maybe next year, Latin?
Latin 1.
Latin, oh, just Latin 1.
We have
Are all
51.
of them Lyman Hall students?
They're either current upperclassmen at Lyman Hall, or they're DAG 8th graders, or they're Moran 8th graders looking to.
And there's nobody from Sheehan interested in taking Latin 1?
No, the students become Lyman Hall students. We don't bus students. Well, that's where I'm going to get that data.
Are there, obviously, from that number, there are children from the Sheehan side of town? that are
Correct.
coming over.
Correct.
Do you know how many?
That's what we're going to have for you in your Friday packet.
Okay, just trying to follow along here.
So.
Because I'm just wondering, well, maybe I'm opening up a can of worms here, but if there are enough kids from Sheehan who are interested, why we don't maybe offer it over there? You know, if the language is growing like it is, I would not want to turn children away because they don't want to move from Sheehan to come to Lyman Hall.
We had done an investigation on that. That was actually, we proposed it, and it was unslated to be funded, and then we couldn't do it because of the funding from the town. But we had slated to have part-time teacher at Lyman Hall because we thought that a full-time teacher, because at the time, there wasn't the level of interest at Lyman Hall that she has grown. So now, because it was a matter of, you didn't need 2 full-time teachers. We only had to add like a portion of a teacher to complement even putting German at both schools. So we had the option, so we didn't have to worry about those other issues that arise with children going to different high schools. Now it would be a different proposition because we would need most likely, you would need more than a point, whatever. But it's something, again, as we look at the strategic plan, which we look at every year, I think languages in general are a good area of focus. And I think in terms of the study that we're going to be doing over the next 4 months, because that's what's in the timeline, that it has to be concluded 4 to 6 months the most, we need to, when we meet with the consultants, and when you meet with the consultants at the board and you share your ideas, you need to include that.
And I would like to reiterate the use of offering Latin in the middle school, because like you said, it's the gateway for so many things, and what a better way to be in your middle school years. If you missed out on some of that grammar and stuff when you were in the lower grades, that's where you need to get it. And Latin does help with that tremendously. And not only that, the culture and the history part.
Well, and again, we have to take into consideration all the languages and the numbers because not unlike many districts in the state of Connecticut, and I don't mean to upset anybody, but French is really not growing. French is decreasing rapidly. So therefore, do you look at, instead of offering 3 options at the middle school, do you look at 2, plugging Latin in because it is there is a lot of rigor that has to be built in. Again, those are all conversations that we've started talking about with our administrators, both high school principals, because of scheduling, and we look at, the French load versus a Spanish teacher's load. They're just 2 different animals because the numbers are low. So we're having those conversations. Our administrators are really on the ball with this, and with Kim's support and, of course, Carrie's support, we'll continue to move forward in reviewing that.
That would be great to look at. I think a key piece of that is looking at the number of people coming out of teacher prep programs with Latin. There aren't too many, and that ends up being the sticking point anytime Mandarin or Arabic comes up, which are the critical need languages right now. Our Connecticut teacher prep programs don't even have the tools to be doing. It's more when an outsider comes in, can pass the oral and written skills proficiency test, and then just has Ed Foundation background. We're not producing. I'm thinking Latin is on the short list.
Connecticut colleges never have.
Well,
I wanted to do that many years ago.
So if there's anybody watching at home, when we talk about economic development in Connecticut, this is one of the challenges because if our ed programs aren't producing staff to teach the languages that are critical for business development in our own state, we cannot really wonder why businesses don't come to Connecticut. So it's just something to consider. This is all connected, and I'll just stop because it.
You're right, though. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Did we already take consensus on Latin? No, we didn't,
No,
right?
we haven't.
All right, let's take consensus on Latin to honors level.
Yes.
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 Thank
Okay,
you.
next-
And we'd be, sorry.
ahead.
This would not be for next year's cohort because the program of studies has already been published and the students have registered. So this would be a change to next year's program of studies. Thank you.
So next year's Latin 2 is still academic.
Yes.
18, 19. 19, 20, Latin 2 will move to honors.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. Letter E, the grade requirement in ELA courses for students to receive the seal of biliteracy.
So a few months ago, when I brought to you the seal of biliteracy, the new state, well, we became the 27th state to award this designation to students who demonstrate oral and written proficiency in English and another language. What the state put forward mirrors the national norm, which is that to check off the English piece, students just need to pass 4 years of ELA requirements. And it seemed at the time that you were hoping for us to be able to put forward a more stringent requirement on the ELA piece. I don't think we articulated it that night, but maybe something along the lines of a C in those English courses. The students need to score an intermediate mid on reading, writing, listening, and speaking in the other language. And so it seemed like something that you were interested in that evening, in exploring whether or not we had the autonomy to do that. I got in touch with Megan Alyavicki Fleck, who is the EL consultant at the state level, and she said that we are allowed to impose our own regulations so long as they're more stringent and not less so than what the state has put forward. So we are able to, if, for example, something that we wanted to do was say, you don't just need to pass, with a D- your 4 years of English courses. It needs to be a C, or something along those lines.
Well, I know,
Comments? Questions?
I know I was the person who brought that up, and I'm happy to hear that because I do think it is, it sounds terrible, but prejudicial if one group has to have a certain level and another group doesn't have to have that same level. I think we should have something. I'm happy to hear that that you searched that out for us, and I definitely would be in favor of that.
Yeah. And I think Carrie and I were talking about this earlier this evening to maybe allow some flexibility for students with an IEP or students with an EL designation, for there to be some flexibility in looking at their level of English proficiency as determined by the last links, or are they a complete newcomer to the country, or if they're looking at the IEP. So if there were flexibility with students designated as special ed or English language learners, to hear your thoughts on that as well.
So you haven't developed an actual proposal that says you need a C+ or better. You're just coming back with the information, correct?
Well, I think.
Yes,
I
I think
so.
that would be the case. I think what you'd want to do is you'd want to flesh out, because there's a lot to be discussed. This wouldn't be something just discussed tonight verbally or orally. So if there's, I guess the goal was before we set out on a mission, is there, consensus amongst the board to move forward with something to bring back to all of you to review in writing? Because we'd also want to pass by our attorneys too, because when you get into the special ed law, we want to make sure that we're providing equal opportunity and access.
Yes. So do you want to take consensus to
That'd
move
be
forward
great.
with that?
Yes.
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 Great, thank you.
Oof. All right. You're on the hot seat tonight, Kim.
I'm off it now.
You're off the hot seat tonight, Kim. Good job. Thank you. So our high school creative writing units.
Yes. Hi. Hi. Carrie Laudadio, English Language Arts Curriculum Coordinator. I have 4 creative writing units that were recently written We have an existing, one of the older course outlines for this course. So we took that one document and we developed 4 units. This particular course, we developed the units so that there's flexibility on the part of the teacher to teach them in any order that they would find conducive for the students that they have. Each of the units runs 6 to 10 weeks, depending on flexing, if they have students that are maybe more partial to a particular genre of writing. There's a unit focused on short story and fiction, drama and screenwriting, creative process and poetry, and presentation and student performance.
Questions? Okay, let's go ahead and take, question?
Nope.
Pat, no? Let's go ahead and take consensus on our creative writing units.
Yes.
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 Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Who's the ELA graduation standards? Is that you also?
That's me.
All right, let's hear it.
All right. So we have some proposed revisions to our ELA performance indicators. I prepared the document that you were provided with the indicators that are being tweaked or revised that are highlighted in gray. Anything with a strikeout is being proposed for deletion, and anything in italics for addition, with the exception of, and I apologize for the inconsistency in my formatting, on page 5, there are 2 indicators that are highlighted in the high school bands under writing, where the new proposed wording is in gray, but I forgot to strike out the existing 3.1 and 3.2. But you can at least see in italics and highlighted there what the new proposed wording is. For the most part, these revisions came around as a result of use of these, not only in curriculum development, but also in use in the classroom. Most of it is there was wording that was maybe just a little confusing for students or a little bit on the awkward side. And in the case of writing at the high school, we looked at a little bit more sophisticated language in terms of crafting thesis statements and claims and using evidence to support those claims.
Questions? Ms. Raccio?
Are the students in the high school getting these rubrics before their assessments?
They should be, yes. They are in the units.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be the expectation.
Patty?
Just a real simple question, but I'm wondering, you took out of kindergarten, read and understand the difference between fiction and nonfiction text, and I don't see it anywhere else. Is it we just letting that's not important anymore?
Which page, Patty?
I think it's page 2.
Page 2.
Graduation standard 2. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's first grade, not kindergarten, sorry.
Okay.
But I didn't see it.
So that one we had, that's a good question. We had a lot of conversation about that one. That particular indicator we had developed as sort of a composite of a number of different Common Core standards. And we ended up having a conversation in regards to this revision on the fact that it's not so much that we're concerned that students don't see the difference between those two, but more the skills that you see outlined in the other indicators here. And so we tried to stay very closely tied to the Common Core standards when we developed our original set, and we felt that we had strayed a bit from really where the standards were going with grade 1 skills for reading there, so that's why.
Okay. Thank you.
Just for clarification, I just want to go back to the question that Ms. Raccio asked.
Yes.
These indicators, the students, do they get this or the scoring criteria?
So the scoring criteria have the indicators in the far left column. So they
Okay.
are most likely getting these. They wouldn't be getting
So-
this. They would be getting the scoring criteria for the indicators that go with whatever unit they're
they
in.
have.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I
So they're getting them
asked
in
Ms.
essence, but
Latour, 'cause
just
I said
in
they
a
wouldn't
different
get this.
form.
Yeah, so
Right,
if
not
we-
this. They're not
so
going to
if we
get
could just
this.
if we could just confirm that that's occurring, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Comments? Take consensus on our ELA standards.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. Journalism. Tell us about journalism.
Okay, so journalism curriculum was written, journalism actually has existing units, but they were going on, let's see, they were last revised in 2009. So I had the teachers who are teaching this course come together and we reviewed the existing units. We left the units pretty well intact, but made sure to review the Common Core standards that were in the units now that we also have Journalism 2, which I had brought, I don't know if it was in March for approval. So taking into consideration that we now have this other layer with the course, and we also have our graduation standards and indicators, and you know, just kind of took a look at what resources are being used and that it was reflected well in the documents. So this particular course does have sequential units. And again, the actual titles and focus of the units didn't change from the previous curriculum. And so Unit 1 is uncovering the news, Unit 2 entering the newsroom, Unit 3 in the field, Unit 4 modern media and technology. Really, I mean, I was fascinated taking part in the curriculum writing process because they really immerse the kids in the full academic vocabulary of the journalism field and build it right from the beginning, moving up through the units to, you know, more sophisticated with the writing process and what different ways, you know, in 2018 that journalism takes on a different meaning than it did, you know, historically. They take a look at throughout history different mediums and platforms that were used.
Questions, Ms. Raccio?
On Unit 4, Modern Media and Technology, the textbook that we're using for
Yes.
modern media and technology is nearly 10 years old.
Yeah, so I can tell you the teachers don't use it as you would expect a textbook to be used. It happens to be, we talked about this, we do have it, so we put it in here. They'll use it as a reference occasionally, but really keep the course very current. So they're using much more of an online, current, ongoing with articles and up-to-date happenings in journalism. I talked with the teachers about looking at a new resource, and they just felt like it was not a good use of money given the nature of journalism is so cutting edge. It's always, we want it to be as current as possible. So,
I think that's great. I just worry about consistency between classrooms when they're using their own sources.
Absolutely. Yep. No, that's a good point.
Journalism is not a specific certification, correct? It's a language or English 9 to 12 certification. So what are we offering our journalism teachers in terms of cutting edge type PD for them to teach a course like modern media and technology? Is there anything specific that our teachers are engaging in order to make sure that they're doing the latest and greatest in journalism?
Not recently, they haven't had PD. That might be something good for us to take a look at.
How many different teachers at each high school are teaching the journal? Is it just one teacher that teaches the majority of the journalism classes at each high school?
Just one.
Just one?
One at each high school.
One at each high school?
One at each high school.
Any other questions? That's a good point. You should send them out to Omaha, Dr. Menzel.
That's what I was
That
just
big giant
Send them out.
convention there. Send them out there. There's a big giant. What's that company? What's his name's company out in Omaha? He owns everything. He owns real estate. What's his name?
Are you talking about,
What's his name?
Warren Buffett?
There you go. He does a big giant multimedia. Send those teachers out there.
Let's make note of that.
No, I'm not saying send them out there. I am saying there could hopefully be some quality professional development that we can engage our journalism teachers in.
And we can
Maybe
also
online.
Well, and also
There you
we
go.
can engage. We could also engage. Not that necessarily they're available to us all the time, but we could also look at some of our local media outlets that we do have strong relationships with. I know Fox 61 would be very interested. Channel 8 just had the DAG Hammersholt Middle School students on. So, I mean, there's a lot. So we could very easily, through our connections. So I'd be happy to help with that.
That would be great, and I know the 2 teachers would welcome it. I think oftentimes PD for just the elective courses is something that is a really great point.
Yeah, they would, I think they would have fun with that.
They would.
Even if on that PD day, if they could actually be at one of those, Channel 8 or some of those journalists' place, just to be there and see how things run. Bring that
Absolutely,
back.
yeah.
Questions? Any other questions or comments? Let's take consensus.
Yep.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. Are you the anchor text also?
Yes.
All right, let's hear about this anchor text.
Okay, so this is a template of our anchor text letter that we send home at both middle and high school at the start of each unit of study in English language arts, so that parents are aware of what books the whole class will be reading as a part of the curriculum. Anchor text being the common books that all of the students are reading in a class. So this letter, the management team is not proposing any revisions to the letter itself. They are bringing forward a proposal for the letter to be, so 3 years ago, the anchor text letter was approved, as well as that it would be sent home at the beginning of prior to the beginning of each unit. The management team's requesting that teachers be given the flexibility to send the letter either at the start of each unit as it currently is, or once at the beginning of the school year, where we would list all of the units of study with all of the anchor books in there to give parents sort of an overview of the whole year and what anchor books are coming. And so really we're just looking for flexibility on when the letter can be sent home to include all of the titles for the year.
So if you do it no matter when you send it, is it a generic list that they may be used? They're not necessarily they are definitely being used? Is that true or not?
Typically, the teacher will put a couple of possible options in there. It's narrowed down to provide some flexibility when they get to the unit.
So would they have a better sense as a teacher as to what they would want? Because as they go along in the year, knowing your class and the makeup and where their interest lies and whatnot, would they hone in on, would they still just make a generic list for, if they didn't do it at the beginning of the school year, but for each section, I feel like they could hone in on it better in that scenario. Is that true or not? Do they still want that flexibility of listing multiple books?
It varies. I think right now the teachers who would fall into that category would probably still opt to send it at the beginning of each unit.
Yeah.
I think they're just looking for some flexibility in, there are some situations where they feel like it would be nice to communicate the full list at the beginning of the year with the units that are coming. And so, but I think they were just looking for some flexibility. They know, of course, that the parents need to be notified before the start of the unit.
So what happens when a parent has a problem with a book or a couple books?
So part of this letter is they would respond to the teacher with letting them know that they would prefer their child not read a particular title, and then they would work with the teacher to come up with an alternate title off the anchor text list.
Thank you. Ms. Raccio?
So I'm assuming this came forward because I put out a request of why I wasn't getting the unit letters, and I only got one letter at the beginning of the school year. And the letter basically had in the midst of everything else at the start of the school year, had every anchor book on it. So basically, if I wanted to go through and review every anchor book on the list, that's what I had to do as a parent within 1 week.
Is this for all the courses or
For
just?
this year's high school course. So within a week, I had to go through and highlight any book on the anchor list that I would have a problem with. Not even knowing if those are the books that are going to be presented, not even knowing which ones are unit 1 versus 2, 3, or 4 if I wanted to hone in on the first unit. I'm opposed to, so I asked where the other unit letters were and why I wasn't getting them, and then I all of a sudden got a letter. I'm opposed to this. We're asking for more parent involvement. So what's the big deal about sending the letter 4 times a year with, these are the books I'm going to do? Last year, when I tried to get the letter sent, teachers didn't know what books they were going to actually be teaching at the beginning of the unit. And some teachers thought that the anchor book list was suggested, and that they could just take one thing from it and then supplement with all other books. That's even a bigger issue.
So I think you bring up a good point. I mean, if a teacher was to opt to send it at the beginning of the school year, they wouldn't be able to just give a week. It
Why
would
can't
be
we
the
have
week.
consistency?
It would be the week prior to the. So we would have to clarify that with the teachers if this were to be approved. They wouldn't just be able to give you a week for all 4
I didn't know it was an
units.
annual letter when I got it, but when I got it, it was a week.
Okay. Well, that would definitely need to be addressed.
Ms. Costelli?
So, Tammy, I was actually thinking the opposite way. As a parent, I was thinking, gee, this would be great to know what, although not the whole list of all the anchor books, but if the teacher had honed in on, these are the 4 to 6 books I'm planning to use this year. That then gives the parent the opportunity to explore all of those books earlier in the year, giving them more time to say, oh, in Unit 4, no, my kid's not reading that book, versus only getting that 1 week at the beginning of every unit. I think it just gives them more time that they can possibly plan. So I think it's there's pros and cons to either way of approaching it. Again, not assuming that they're going to send home the entire list of all the anchor books that are potential. That's a little heavy.
That's too much.
Purcell?
Just clarification, so, how many books are on that list?
It varies each year, but they're fairly lengthy.
Okay.
The letters I don't see all of the letters that the teachers send home, but the ones that I've seen, they've honed in on a select number of texts per unit. So I would also be concerned if they were sending the whole list. I would want to clarify that as well.
And when they send the list, do they tie them to like which unit?
Yes.
They do.
Well, the ones I've seen have.
Not all.
Not all, okay.
Right. And just one question, just with Roxanne, what Roxanne said, because I don't know. It said that if the book's discussed, you put students in a different learning environment. What is that about? Where do they go?
Right. So that was part of the original letter. And the thought there was that there would be some situations where if the class was discussing a particular part of the book and a student was reading a different book, that they would feel, not in the loop or not part of the discussion. So it would just mean the teacher working out a different structure for them.
So they'd leave the classroom and go to.
Not necessarily. That might not necessarily be worded quite as accurately. First of all, to be honest with you, I haven't really heard of too many situations where students had opted out of books. For this particular case, it's a teacher by teacher, student by student, family by family basis. So they would work out a particular, understanding with how that, and I think that also lends itself to where a lot of the focus with instruction is going in our department at the high school right now, is broadening out, not to be so focused necessarily on a particular book, but more on the reading skills and strategies that go into comprehending that book and getting larger themes and other concepts. So I don't know, maybe that might need to be revisited, that wording.
That was my question for you. When we're referring to anchor text, are we referring to the entire class reading one book?
No, we shouldn't.
Which is what we're moving away from, correct?
So the anchor text really plays a key role in the English language arts classroom. I think where there needs to be some additional focus, which is really what we've been working with the departments on, is not so long on the anchor books. There is a role for the anchor book to teach key skills and concepts with complex text. But then after it really shouldn't go any longer than 20 minutes. And then from there, students should be transferring that skill or concept to other texts or to other situations, to conversations, to other learning.
So when you think about, for example, like an elementary classroom where you have your focus lesson at the beginning of your reading lesson, and everyone's getting that consistent focus, they should be using the anchor text for that and then transferring to more student voice and choice and to apply the things that they're learning. And as it relates back to a couple of comments ago, I think it's important, whatever the will of the board is, that there are certain protocols that are put into place, regardless of whether it's before each unit or at the beginning of the year, in terms of timeliness, in terms of structure for the letter, so that you don't have, for example, a week to preview 4 different titles that are on this, because the purpose of this is so that every family is well informed about the instruction that's occurring within the classroom, and we want to make certain that parents have the ability to review the content of each text so that they're comfortable with what their child is experiencing, and they get that information in a timely manner, which doesn't appear to be happening in every classroom.
Which, again, goes back to my point, 4 years of high school, if we did it consistently as a parent, I'd know what to expect every every year, as opposed to, this teacher did it this way last year, why are you doing it different this year? And then you're kind of stuck, you don't know what to expect.
Completely understand.
Roxanne?
Yeah, so what are you looking for from us tonight? Is this a letter brand new, or?
The letter
what-
is not
what-
brand new.
Yeah.
When the letter was originally approved,
Yeah.
it was approved to be sent at the beginning of each unit of study, or
Okay.
prior to, at least a week prior to each unit of study.
Right.
So the management team is asking for the flexibility for teachers to have the option to either send it at the beginning of each unit of study, as they currently are, or at the beginning of the school year, kind of laying out the units for the year with the anchor text that could potentially be used in each unit.
So you're looking, the letter really hasn't changed, you're just looking for the venue, how and when it gets
Yes.
sent
Yes.
is what you're looking for.
Yes.
So you want the flexibility that a teacher can choose whether they do it once a year or they do it at the beginning of each of their, whatever their new.
Right.
I don't know, I kind of feel like we should be consistent. I don't know, I kind of, like, what's the problem? Why do we need this? I guess. Am I missing something? Help me out.
I think there are some teachers at both our middle schools and high schools who feel like it's a bit cumbersome to send the same letter with just a different unit title and book titles in it 4 or 5 times a year.
That's sad.
Yeah, I'm not, I mean, I don't know.
Is the anchor text published online?
Yes.
So why are we sending letters home at all if it's published online?
It's an email. And then there's a link to descriptions, actually very good descriptions as to what each text is. I don't have to go Google each text. I can actually click on it. It's
Okay.
well done.
Yeah.
It just needs to be consistent and manageable for parents.
We don't, but we're not sending a letter home saying these are all the text we're using in social studies class this year. We're not separating it out, correct? These are the first person documents we're studying in history class. We're not separating it out. We're just separating out, for whatever reason, the anchor text. Why can't we just post it online? And if you want to look at what could,
Well, because the parents, I think, have to sign off on this, right?
Yeah, the parents sign off. The
So-
list is also fairly lengthy, so it gives the teacher an opportunity to identify particular
See,
texts off the
I
list
guess
for
I'm
units.
confused. I think it's more cumbersome and more opportunity for missing something if everybody's doing their own thing. I mean, if you know, however you decide, whether it's once a year or once every unit. I mean, I'm not saying I have a preference, but I just feel like we should be consistent in how we deliver that information to our parents and our families. I'm missing I just think that's more confusing for families.
To have it be different.
Well, yeah, and then also, I think it actually could be a challenge because a teacher could forget to do it. Let's say a teacher opts to do it at the beginning of each unit, they may forget to send it out.
That's what they're doing now.
That's
the process now.
Is sending it out.
The beginning of each unit.
Well, but that's not what I'm hearing is being done. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, but I
That's
thought Karen was saying
anecdotally.
some teachers feel it's very cumbersome
There-
because it is one more thing they have to remember to do.
Yeah.
So, personally, again, as a parent, I'd love it at the beginning of the year. Tell me what
Yeah,
they're gonna be doing all year long.
Yeah,
Then
I don't
can
have a.
prepare myself if
Yeah,
I want it.
I don't have a dog in the fight for when you do it. I really don't. I'm not here to, I'm not there, so I don't know what's easier for staff members that's fine to decide, but I do feel we should be consistent. That's all I'm saying.
I just want to clarify, you're asking for the option to do it either at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of every unit, whatever's easiest for the teacher. That's what you're
Yeah.
asking for.
I think so.
Correct.
Yeah.
That would assume that at the beginning of the year, the teacher knows what books they're going to use for every unit then. So you wouldn't send out the entire list, just saying, I could pick anything on this list this year.
Correct. I would clarify that with them. Yes,
'Cause
for sure.
that,
Yeah, I agree. It can't be the whole.
No.
There's no point in sending it out if you're going to send me the whole list of anchor books.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Right.
agree with that.
Right.
Right, and that
Agreed.
would also then limit the teacher to be able to change said choices as time goes on, because you can't
Correct.
put something out at the beginning of the year only then to change it.
Oh,
So there, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you're not gonna allow them to change it, because I was thinking then if they wanted, if the need arose,
Right.
where this particular class maybe just was,
Yeah. I
you
hear
know,
what you're saying.
different,
But
and she wanted to
But-
lead them in a
But
different
put-
direction
put-
now.
Put yourself in the position of a parent who has vetted every single one of those
Yeah, that's
titles.
true.
And then there's a
Because the
change.
teacher is saying, this is where I feel like I'm going to go with my curricular units, right?
Mm.
And then a week before one of the units, there's all, you send home
They
another
change it.
letter to say, oh, by the way, I decided to change my
Well,
mind,
s-
which you can do based on needs of the group or,
Right.
whatever.
But Carrie, that makes an argument for why you'd want to do it at the beginning of each unit, to
Right.
be
Yeah.
honest with
Yeah.
you. So it affords the flexibility for the
Right.
teacher.
I think the management team might need to look a little bit more closely at, the protocol itself. The fact that you're putting, going at the beginning of the unit, determining, timeline for that so that it's well thought out and going forward. Because even just a week to look at every text, people get busy. And you do need to, if you're one of those parents who want to look through it, you need some time to do that. And then furthermore, as it gets, it's a nice communication tool for
Yeah.
parents to say, okay, we're shifting gears now, we're getting into another unit. It promotes conversation as well
Yeah.
with your child and with your students. So these are just some of the things that, we need to consider when we're looking at that. I would hate to change midstream if we're doing it at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
I just think with technology right now, we could certainly put on a calendar. Carrie, you could put on the calendar, on this date, you have to have that email out. If it's already written in an email and you're changing the units and just a couple things, I don't think it's that tough to do 4 times a year, whatever time. And it would give more flexibility and to both
Yeah,
the
it does
parents
give more
and to the teacher.
Yeah.
So as long as they know, like on a calendar, marking periods, when parent conferences are, just put that on the calendar.
Right, good point.
Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how often or how many parents exercise this?
I haven't been made aware of any in recent years. I would have to ask specifically, but none that have come to my attention. Maybe in
exercise what, like the opt-out?
the opt-out.
Oh, I opted out.
Okay. But in all fairness, I don't,
One.
if it's not brought to my attention and I
I'm that
haven't
parent.
asked either, the teachers have handled
Okay
it.
being in the minority.
I get that.
So you want us to give you permission tonight to give the flexibility, I'm just reiterating this again in my mind, of the beginning. I don't think we're there yet. Sorry. I can't speak for other people,
We
but
can take consensus, but we might not get consensus.
that's your call. So is that what you want me to do? Are
You
you?
want to take consensus and not get consensus?
You're the chair. You do what you want. It's your
Let's take
meeting.
consensus.
Okay.
Can you tell us
Attempt to take consensus.
Can you tell us exactly what
Yeah,
consensus
thank you.
is?
On giving teachers the flexibility to send the anchor text, parent notification letter at their convenience.
Well, I don't think it's at their convenience, because
Let's not take consensus. I changed my mind. Let's not even do it.
To be honest with you,
I don't think we're ready. Let's not
Carrie,
take it.
I would like, can we
Exit.
get some more reasoning from
go.
the
Sure.
teachers that really are
Yeah.
looking for it,
4 times a year is,
that want to do it once a year versus the 4 times a year? Because
Yeah.
I was assuming, until Carrie brought it out, that if they did it once a year, they'd still have the flexibility of saying, well, yeah, I'm changing my mind here because this group just isn't ready to go in that direction. And then notifying the parents, if, you know, for this unit, we aren't going to be doing what I had earlier suggested, we're going to be doing this.
And that may be the reason that they give the whole list, so that it leaves their options open.
Right, right.
And it's not to say that they couldn't, but I think Carrie brings up a good point. If a parent vetted and read some of the titles and then it's changed,
Well, of
then
course,
they
you
would
have
be
to put a
given
disclaimer out there
additional-
saying, okay,
on
this
there.
is what I think I'm going to be doing this year, this is what I would like to lead this
Right.
group in, but, you know, subject to change
Yeah.
as necessary.
And you can see, oh, go ahead.
I just think the consistency piece is what I'm looking for personally.
Well, and the teachers have worked very, very hard, so on really trying to make certain that they're making shifts in terms, like you said, the anchor text and getting students to work on voice and choice. They're trying to work in that direction, so we'd hate to have something that's meant to be a good thing, not be a good thing. So I think more information from them as to their rationale. If there's some revisions to the letter, because I think that it sounds like that might be a good opportunity. More of a template, maybe. I'm hearing maybe a template that could be already developed that they just have to plug and play, no matter if it goes out 4 times, 1 time, whatever the decision ultimately is. But for that consistency, because again, they're working hard and they're trying to make this, you know, as communicative as possible.
Right.
So we want to help them in that area.
And reminder that it's available online at any point.
Yes. I think that's a good little statement.
But it's huge. There's a lot of text out
It's
there.
a good little
It's a
statement
lot.
at the bottom to add. I'm sorry I shut my microphone off, Ray. I apologize.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we are going to talk about J, the spring universal screen results. Carrie, and this is intervention results, correct?
Yes. It's a long way around the table, so Karen is passing your copy
Thanks.
out. It's not a presentation, it's informational by school. You have the same information that I provided back in February, beginning of. So you have each school, you have Star Renaissance data at the top, ERLA data in the middle, intervention numbers towards the bottom. Really pleased with many data points throughout this packet that I provided you. Lots of positive growth, moving in the right direction, with the STAR testing in particular, which is, you know, nationally normed, early literacy, reading, and math. ERLA, there's still, ERLA is day to day. So, you know, the chart that is in your packets may look in many schools different today than when I printed this picture last week. It is done formatively with kids as needed. There is no specific date where we target the reassessment for students. It is truly done. Some kids need it after 3 weeks, some kids after 2 months. It really is dependent. But also, you know, headed in the right direction. There are some grade levels in particular at particular schools that we're finding some, you know, higher at-risk numbers for this time of year than I would like, but those principals are meeting with the teachers to look at focus of instruction, how often they're being met with in group, and what is holding them back from moving on to, you know, the next level. In terms of our intervention numbers, spring screen concluded the week before April break. The 13th was the last day of the window. Again, seeing some nice exiting numbers, fewer numbers of students entering intervention, and I'm personally meeting with the intervention teams at the different buildings. I've already gone to 2. I'm on my little road show to really look at those students who are remaining in intervention but have screen numbers, because we use multiple measures to determine entrance into intervention, you know, where they are in their path. Oftentimes schools like to hold on to students through the remainder of the year because there's only 7 weeks of school left, and they like that little boost and that strong showing before kids leave for the summer, in the hopes of really putting them on firm foundations. So we're looking at all those numbers carefully. And we're looking at how the trends are running from fall through spring. So you'll notice at the very last page, I do want to point out, like I did last time, Lyman Hall and Sheehan, you know, this 100% of the student population does not take STAR testing in English language arts and math. For some of our math students, it's dependent by which course they're enrolled in. For English language arts, if they're showing a strong proficiency in multiple screens, they don't have to take the screen again. So, which is why you see, especially in our upperclassmen, some of the numbers for the spring screen fairly static between intervention on watch and proficient.
Hey, so Carrie,
Mm-hmm.
going up, I'm just looking quickly at percentages. At
Yep.
Pond Hill,
Mm-hmm.
spring, 150%. I don't think so.
Oh, it's 15%.
It's 15? Okay,
It's
that's
the
what I wanted.
formatting and percentage.
Yeah, no problem. I
thought
just didn't,
caught
I
them
knew
all.
it wasn't right, but I
You know
just.
when you change your
Yeah,
formatting
no
midway
worries.
through?
I just wanted to know
Mhm.
what the right number is. It's 15.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yep.
I just want to make one comment. I would just like to publicly thank Carrie Latour for pulling all of this together. I know that it's an expected task, but the way that she goes about doing it, and as she just mentioned, her roadshow, going and meeting with the interventionists personally, meeting with those principals, is truly a tribute to her dedication to see these scores, our students, most importantly, succeed at a higher level. So I just want to clearly state that. She has worked so collaboratively with the interventionists, and I know that's a focus that we together are going to continue to support next year. This year, Carrie really focused, as she shared, I think, one time or another, on EL bilingual, because there was a need to kind of gather that group together to work with the staff and bringing in some consultants to work with them. And next year, again, while she continues to focus this year on intervention, really continuing that at a different level. But I just want to say thank you and really show her, give her support and give her credit for really trying to work to make this, to take it to the next level. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Patty?
Yeah, and I just had a question. I know you had already mentioned, sorry, I know you had already mentioned about, not everyone takes math. She in high school, I'm just looking at the grade 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume that the same number of people are taking this test, right, from fall to winter to spring? But it's
No.
dropped, no?
Right,
Okay, so
no.
explain that, is
So
that
I will
where
give
this
you the
comes
number of
into?
students from
Okay.
fall to spring. I'll just send that to you in an email, just so you know the
So-
cohort changes over time.
So it's not like a full year course?
No, for some, yes. And then
Okay.
for others, it's dependent on when you become proficient and how many times in a row you were proficient so that you don't have to take it a third time.
Got it, okay.
Do you know what I mean? We've tried to give some incentives to high school
Okay.
students in order to put their best foot forward, which from the high school teachers, the feedback has been very positive with that. They're finding that the results are more accurate, and the students are really trying their best, and so therefore they won't have to do it all 3 times.
Got it.
So it's a
Okay.
little bit of both, Patty.
Thank you.
Mrs. Castelli.
So, Carrie, with that said, does this get put out on WPS? Do we publish
I
this?
do, and I do put the little
Little asterisk?
notation
Okay,
that says,
perfect, thank you.
yep, the cohort is a little bit different. I did that for December, and I will do the same for spring.
Ms. Raccio?
Do we know how many students are Tier 2 versus Tier 3, I know for identification purposes, we can't go too granular, but even if we know like K to 2 or 3 to 5?
Yep, there's certainly more in K2 right now than there are 3 to 5. I do have the exact numbers, I'll tally them up, because I asked them to designate that on their caseload sheets with which they share with me. Part of going from school to school is determining also, it's a very individual process to determine when a student goes from Tier 2 to Tier 3. So it also helps me get some insight and some background as to how that process plays out in each building, what types of information they use to designate. Because while there are some consistencies, there are some inconsistencies as well.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question. Oh my gosh, it's gonna escape me. What was it? Oh, I lost it.
Tier 1? Tier 2?
I know.
Tier 3?
No, it was an easy one too. Oh, nobody was newly identified through this testing? I just see exited.
Where?
No, you kind of have to do the math, because or else the chart would be super small. There are some kids who were newly identified in. So when you do the
Oh,
math
'cause I'm
between winter
comparing
total
to-
and spring
to-
total,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
there
'Cause we had a
are.
different column.
You did.
You're
But there's
tricking
only
me.
so much you can fit on a piece of paper here.
Okay.
So you'll have to do a little bit of mental math. Some of it is an even Steven, which means there's no new entrants. And then there's some you can tell with the number of exited and where they are now, that there are some kids that entered. But the numbers are low.
But exited doesn't necessarily mean exited because they're not proficient. They could have exited and gone to special ed. So exited is.
Exited is just exited,
Exited,
whether it's
right.
special ed, screened out, met goal, there
Okay.
are, different ways you can exit from intervention. Moved, that's even moved, students who have moved.
Any other questions?
You know, I'm confused, and maybe I'm not understanding this, but I'm seeing that proficiency in high school from grade 9 in math, for instance, at best is 75, then it goes up to 79 in the next year, and then it goes down to 66, then 47.
Where are you?
Proficiency.
Where are you exactly looking?
Then on the
last
last page.
Oh, I see.
And the proficiency just drops dramatically?
No, the students who are taking it, there aren't as many. So if students are proficient band, if they're proficient at more than one test, they don't have to take it a third time. So your cohort size is much smaller. And there are students who weren't proficient in the prior test. So it's a bit of a different makeup. So it's not that the proficient level is going down, the cohort is changing in who's taking it. Because we have, for some students, we have told them you don't have to take it a third time because you've already done so well and you've been consistent in your proficiency in the fall and in the winter, if that makes sense.
So Carrie's going to provide at a later date the actual numbers of students, so you'll see how that shifted. Because again, based on what she just said, some students no longer take the test because they met goal. This is really just a percentage of the students who have to
Who
take it
take
each
the
time.
test.
Right.
Correct.
You're kind of comparing apples and oranges.
Well, okay, thank you.
No problem.
Is it possible to get cohort numbers like in this scale, in this graph?
I can pick through every student.
Oh, no. No, I'm just trying to.
That would take me a little bit of time, though.
That would be good.
Do we look at PSAT and SAT scores, so weed out who takes STAR at all?
We haven't to date. Looking at intervention in general, and having the year to really look at what every school is doing and how we're entering and exiting kids and those types of things, and whether we're getting the information that we need back, because STAR is a great instructional tool. In when you look at it. We have some work to do as we move on, which is why this has been the gift of a year to really look at how it does look in kindergarten or in grade 12 to then decide where we're going to take our next steps.
Thank you. Questions, anybody else? Okay, thank you, Carrie. We're not taking any consensus on that. We're just looking at it, right? Yeah, okay. We'll move on to new policy, the one-to-one Chromebook mobile device program.
Okay, so in front of you, you have both a policy and a regulation. In the fall of this year, Karen Valu, Joe Corso, and Rosemary did a little presentation about one-to-one. And this is the corresponding policy and regulations as it relates to how we are rolling out one-to-one Chromebook for the high school in the fall. So the policy is fairly straightforward. The regulation is really where you're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how we're doing it in Wallingford in terms of responsibilities for student management, what the expectations are. There are forms that are included in the regulation for your review about protection plans and user agreements, all of which were vetted out through, Karen's group of IT directors that she consults with, as well as the town.
How about legal? Legal too?
Mm-hmm.
Questions? Ms. Raccio?
how is this going to affect students who want to bring their own device or are encouraged to?
This isn't a BYOD policy.
Correct.
This is, you are being given this Chromebook by the district. So at this point, we don't have a BYOD policy. Students shouldn't be using their own technology in the classroom.
I think we're going to need to address that because we even have syllabuses that talk about BYOD. So I know from, not to put my teenager on the spot on camera, but he doesn't want to use the Chromebook. He'd rather use his laptop, so he won't use a Chromebook unless he's forced to. So you're going to have students who want to use their own technology and are accustomed to being told in their classes, even, bring your own technology if you want it for an exam.
So we are going to have to address that, and we are going to have to, unfortunately, my recommendation, and I would look to my IT director, is that unfortunately we'll have to force them to use the Chromebook. Because the fact is we can't support, and the security measures,
That's the big thing.
I can't control, I shouldn't say we can't control what they're doing on those. So we are going to have to come down heavy on that, and most districts, and Karen, you could jump in.
Say, we did discuss this a little bit, and we just felt from the teaching standpoint, when kids are using different devices, that's more difficult. But also from the management standpoint of the device control, filtering everything else, keeping the kids on task. Really, the Chromebook was going to be the answer for that.
You'll make this mom happy.
Okay.
I wasn't sure there. I
we-
was going both
we've
ways,
heard-
so I'm glad to hear that,
We've
Tim.
heard from a few. No, we've heard from
Why do you have to bring yours? Or
We've heard from a few parents, actually, that it's a challenge. And I think the teachers, if we really want, and we have teachers who want to use the technology, but as Karen just said, having different devices in the room and trying to support them as a teacher, and it's just, we're adding another layer of complexity that doesn't need to be there.
We're overcomplicating.
And I think that the proposal here with the insurance, and we did talk to our attorneys about the insurance and the town about the insurance, because I know that was a concern. So I mean, I think it's a very strong proposal for a policy, and $30 for insurance, and of course we'd have, if there's people in need that are interested, we'll work through that. We always work through that with families. But I really do want to thank Karen again and the principals, and Carrie. The principals have been very involved with this along the way. So
We did. If I could just say, we're not the first school to look at doing this, which is a good thing. So there's a lot of information, a lot of schools, and we may be coming back next year and tweaking it, because we are going to learn by once we jump into this with both feet, what works for Wallingford. And even the schools that have been doing it for years now have been tweaking certain things based on, the kind of damages they're seeing and other things. So although the policy hopefully doesn't need to be changed, the forms that may go with it may be tweaked from year to year.
So if, as an entering freshman, do they get a Chromebook, and that's their Chromebook for 4 years? And all
That is the plan.
Yeah, and
Yes.
all summer, it never,
No.
the only time it gets returned back to the school district is when they graduate or
No,
leave the
so-
district.
No, we may want to get to that, but the first year we are going to collect them and assess, the work it's going to take and everything else. The concerns over that is they're not being charged all summer, they're not getting updates. You hand the child back their same Chromebook and they say, didn't have that scratch on it, when I handed it in. So schools are like, do we take photos of everyone while we're returning them? But the first year, we're gonna collect them and plan on doing that.
So at the end of the
Assess-
school year,
At the
you're
end of
gonna
the
collect
school
all the
year, we're
Chrome-
gonna collect them, assess how much work that takes, what the issues are, and then that may be one of the changes we come back to you next year and say, we're not gonna collect them next year,
Yeah.
so.
So, I mean, because I would think that's very laborious for your people. I would hope that the goal is that we move towards, they own it for the 4 years, and whatever condition we get it back, if we even, I
pretty
don't know,
much
what's the
is-
life
yeah.
expectancy?
About 4 years.
Yeah,
That's
so
pretty much
that's
it.
pretty much, and in the hands of a 14, 15 to 18-year-old, forget about it. I mean, that's
I
gonna be
did-
brutal.
I'll just mention here, we don't have anything in the policy or anything to reflect this, but one thing I was working on with the town is if someone bought the protection plan each year, at the end of 4 years, they could possibly keep it as sort of an incentive to buying it every year. And that's something we kind of have to work out a little bit. There's a couple of hoops we'd have to jump through, but it's not out, it's not a no, it's a possibility. It is an optional protection plan.
Yep. So is this gonna start one-on-one for our high school students come this fall?
That's the plan,
Yep.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
I do have one comment.
go ahead.
to, Carrie, I think we need to add, or should we add, or can we add, I don't know, legally.
What's the word?
Yeah, well, you know,
Well,
under
remember, this is your
responsibilities.
first read, so you can
Okay.
comment,
Right.
That's
ask
true.
for additions or deletions.
Where are you?
Right, so
Right.
I'm on page 3, responsibilities. Second to last paragraph, the last sentence actually, it says parents or guardians will also incur a financial obligation, you know, for any repairs that are required. Can we add students to that? You know, in other words, you know, the kids, so I as a parent would want to put that onus on my kid maybe, you know? You're 16 years old, you're going to take responsibility for this. I'm not taking the financial responsibility for it. But if the kid can bring the policy to me and say, but Ma, it says you have the responsibility, I don't. So can we add student to the responsibility for repairs? Or is it legally not allowed?
I don't see why we can't. We have, if you flip towards the back, the student user agreement and parent permission form requires both a parent and a student signature. So I don't see why you couldn't. Ultimately, it's the household.
The household, exactly. But I mean,
It is.
I would like it spelled out in the policy if we can, that it could be the student's responsibility as well as the
So
parents.
the student and his or her parents or
Right.
guardians will also incur?
Right.
Okay.
And then I do think we have a mistake, I could be wrong.
We do. Last page, 260.
Yeah,
Yeah, yep.
okay, got it.
That'll be updated for your next viewing as well.
Okay. Oh, and one other question. When the book, when a Chromebook is out for repair, do we have extras to give the kid to loan them?
Yeah, the plan is we're going to sort of funnel the repairs through the library media. So they would go there, drop off their Chromebook, take a loaner out.
Okay,
The idea is, again, to give them back their same Chromebook after it's repaired,
Right.
because, you know, otherwise, again, you
Right.
deal with this key wasn't loose when I got it, kind of a
right,
thing.
right, okay.
So that is the plan.
I just want to make sure they would still have access to a device while
Yes.
theirs was being repaired. Okay.
Inevitably, there will be students who violate the acceptable use of one-on-one Chromebooks. In those cases, is there standardized protocol in place to, like, if a student loses his Chromebook or it gets taken away because he violates, and now he doesn't have access to the internet, is he then required to bring his own device to access it? What happens at that point? Or we haven't gotten that far yet?
I don't think we've gotten there
Okay.
that quite yet. I think, you know, we do have a responsible use policy, and if students are in violation of that, there are consequences. Those are done and dealt with on a case-by-case basis, dependent on the level and the age of the child. So, because you could experience that down in the elementary school, while they don't have their own Chromebook, they're using Chromebooks daily within the school. So, you know, in terms of step 1, step 2, no, I think it'll be a learning year for everyone. And we'll kind of go from there. But no, they wouldn't, because we don't have the BYOD policy. So,
Right.
you know, from that point,
Well, the challenge that, when in talking with other districts, is that because the district is issuing the Chromebook, we still, and if the classroom is going to go Google Classroom and you have access, it becomes somewhat of a textbook for the student. So the thing is that they would, I think what most districts are doing, and this is something we would have to investigate further, is that they're just removing the privilege of the student taking the Chromebook home. So they're making the Chromebook available in school if it's because they don't want to limit his or her activity and say now we don't have a free appropriate public education, but they're just saying your privilege of this being yours has been removed. But again, we'll investigate that further,
Okay.
but because we'd have to be cautious, as you know, in your role.
Any other questions?
Okay, and then the second one, responsible use for students. This is an existing policy and regulation for Wallingford Public Schools. There are minor changes to this. This was 2013 was the last time this came through. It's really the first time, right? They're just, taking off some things that are a kind of older terminology. And our policy was a little bit contradictory, so you'll see that incidental personal use section that we struck out, because we're stating, and we did state back in 2013 that it was for educational related purposes only, and this talks about personal email checking and that type of thing as long as it doesn't disrupt the school responsibilities. But we just felt that, especially in this day and age, it's just wise to take all that out. It's for school.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
My concern with that is there are times when you have high school juniors and seniors who need access to their own personal email for college board reasons and for college application reasons. Because at some point, they will lose their Wallingford Public Schools email. So I always advise my students, do not use your Ansonia Public Schools email because you won't have it when you graduate. And this is what you need to access things in July after you've already graduated. So I hesitate removing a personal
That is a
email
very good point.
for those reasons, for scholarships, for college board access, for a number of different reasons.
So I think then potentially my role will be to go back and just wordsmith this part to talk about personal use of for email, but for educational related matters, which then would go towards scholarships, college admissions, et cetera, but isn't getting into truly
Your order from
personal.
LL Bean, got it.
Right. So I'll
Right.
work on that section a little bit to make it less broad in terms of personal, but still allow for uses of it as it relates to education. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mrs. Raccio?
Along those lines, when there's communications for whether it's scholarships or colleges or anything, there's also communications between Wallingford Public Schools employees and students with personal emails. And I know that's kind of frowned upon, but it happens. It's the way the kids communicate. They check their personal email a lot more than they check their school email, especially over the weekends. So again, to Erin's point, we're helping the kids set up personal emails when they're logging onto College Board the first time if they don't have it. And then there are times that guidance actually uses the personal emails.
Just to point out too, in Wallingford, our students don't have access to emails from outside the district, if you will.
Well, we could talk offline, because I don't want to
So.
share what I know with you with the camera rolling, but they can send anything anywhere from any account.
Well, I think I'll take that under consideration and kind of see what else is out there, and kind of go from there. And I'll, at the board meeting at the end of the month, when it's your second read, I'll kind of report back what I found and kind of how to address it, if everybody's okay with that. These are very good comments.
That's why we have 3 reads.
Any other questions? Public comment? Seeing no
Evan, you have
public.
anything to say?
Seeing no public. Does anybody else have anything to add?